Okay, so before we get started talking about the play, does anybody have any questions about the exam or about the paper or about anything that's coming up? Yeah, Brian?
To clarify, on the exam, each question should be at least 3 paragraphs? Or
What you're looking for with the exam questions is about 4 to 5 blue book pages, right? The blue books are about like yay big, right? And I'll provide the blue books for you. I think it's bullshit that you have to pay to take a test. So yeah, I'll have those here. Any other questions about the exam or about the paper? No? All right, great. Heat makes people quiet. Why the hell is it this warm in February?
Wait,
It's worse upstairs.
is the exam next Tuesday? Yeah. Well,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
And it's in class, right?
It is in class, yeah. So yeah, we will come here. And honestly, like, if it's still this bad, I'll bring a fan or something.
Are we going to be tested over this since it?
This will be the last thing that appears on the exam.
Okay,
yeah.
so we'll cover all of it.
Yeah,
today. Okay.
yep, it's gonna cover everything up to midterm, yep. So, yes, this will be on the exam.
And
Yeah,
this
do-
doesn't have to do with the paper or the exam, but
Okay.
those project topics,
Yes.
where are those posted? I think I got mine like written down right, but
What did you write down?
Whites, I guess, SOC as a response to Jamie.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's what you're doing.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think I do have those posted on Georgia View. I will take care of that. Send me an email to remind me, and I'll put that up on Georgia View.
And will you just put our grade for that in Georgia View or how will that?
Yeah, I'll email you a short explanation
Okay.
of the justification of the grade. I actually still need a bibliography from you.
Yes,
as
I
well.
have it.
Yes,
I can
okay.
pick it up. Sorry.
You just give it to me after class.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, then let's talk about what I've got up on the projector screen here, in large part because it's really kind of important to understanding much of what is going on in this particular play. Right now, when we talked about Things Fall Apart and the Igbo worldview, we were kind of much less concerned most of the time with their metaphysical worldview than with their sort of everyday cultural practices, right? Soyinka is much more concerned with Yoruba metaphysics than he is with day-to-day cultural practices. Now, it would actually probably benefit us to think a little bit about how these two civilizations differ from each other, because that will help us understand what's going on in the play. They're adjacent to each other, right? The Yoruba heartland isn't like if and again, I apologize for the shittiness of my artwork. Okay, so this is Nigeria. The Atlantic Ocean is over here. The Yoruba heartland is in southwestern Nigeria. The Igbo heartland is in southeastern Nigeria. So there are going to be certain similarities, right? But they speak a different language. And while the Igbo are primarily agrarian, right? Their whole sort of social structure is based on farming villages that, taken together, make up a town like Umuofia, right, where Okonkwo comes from, is it's not so much, it's not a coherent city, right? It's a collection of related villages that come together to make decisions. The Yoruba were city builders, and they were mercantile, right? They were building cities from about the 8th century. And cities in exactly the way we would think of cities, right? Just large urban conglomerations full of trading activity, right? So really more traders than farmers. And their society was also much more hierarchical, right? If we think back to what we learned about the Igbo over the last week and a half, did the Igbo have hereditary kings or chiefs?
No.
No. Yeah. Anybody potentially can take titles, right? Anybody can become a person of importance in the clan, regardless of birth, right? As long as you have merit, as long as you work hard at it. The Yoruba do have hereditary kings and chiefs. And in fact, that's sort of like one of the central issues in this particular play is the duty that a son has to take on because his father fails, right? So we are talking about a feudalist society here. Now, what I've got up on the projector screen here is a visualization of the way the Yoruba imagine the world to be, right? We have, in the lower half here, Aye, which is the living world. So, Aye is the world of human beings, right? We have knowledgeable human beings, and by knowledgeable, what they mean is people who have been initiated into adulthood, initiated into the kinds of secret societies that are important in Yoruba culture, right? People who have been initiated into knowledge of the other world. The unknowing are strangers, like people who are not Yoruba, people who have not been initiated into any of the societies, and children. Now, you may notice here that all of the arrows from the upper world, right, Orun, which is where spirits and gods live, point downward, right? The contact is all regarded as being pretty much one way. So, much like the Igbo concept of Chukwu, right? Chukwu as this kind of overarching creator deity who people don't approach directly. The Yoruba have a similar concept, but they call him Oludumare. Oludumare has no gender, is unknowable by human beings. The Orisa, the gods, are very, very powerful and ancient ancestor spirits who have been deified, and they're divided into two categories. The Bigona are temperamental or hot gods. These are gods who are regarded as being more active, by and large, right? That's really what temperamental or hot means. For example, Ogun is a god of blacksmiths and artists. Sango is a thunder god, right? So these are gods who act often violently in the world. The cool or calm gods, the Funfun, are more passive. Now, you may notice here that the Orisa do not act directly on the world of the living either. Between the Orisa and the living, we have this other category, right? Esu Elegba and Ifa. Ifa is the god of divination and is also simply the Yoruba word for the practice of divination. So they'll take out a board, it's round, and they'll divide it into quarters and throw some animal bones on it. And the pattern the bones landed and where they land indicates what they're looking to know. But yeah, so Ifa is both that practice of divination, whereby you learn the will of the gods, and the god who allows that process to happen, right? So that's one way mortals can learn what the gods want from them. The other is through this sort of trickster god called Esu or Elegba. Elegba is usually represented as an old man with a limp, right? He looks weaker than he really is. And Elegba is supposed to be the sort of direct go-between between human beings and the gods. In fact, Yoruba religion is a big influence on African American religions in the Americas, like, for example, Haitian Vodun, right? Which is sometimes sort of more popularly called voodoo. It's not actually called voodoo, it's called Vodun. But Legba is an important god in Vodun, right? And because Vodun is a syncretic religion. Does anybody know what the word syncretic means? If we talk about a syncretic religion?
Not really.
Okay, so a syncretic religion is one that is sort of constructed out of different religious traditions, right? You take two or more religious traditions and fuse them together. Sometimes that fusing is more or less superficial, as is sort of the case in Vodun. It's often a response to persecution. So when African slaves were brought to the Caribbean, particularly to French colonies, right, they were often forced to convert to Roman Catholicism. So what they did was continue to worship their own traditional deities, but they combined those deities with a similar Catholic saint, right? So that it looked to their masters like they had honestly and truly converted. So Legba, the reason I talk about this, right, Legba in Vodun is often represented as a man holding a ring of keys, identified with the Catholic Saint Peter, right? So he fills a similar sort of function in Yoruba religion, right? He is the gatekeeper to the other world. Okay, so ancestor spirits also continue to act upon the world. Remember, we talked about this idea of history in West Africa, right? The past continues to act on the present, and the present acts on the past as well, right? History is regarded as being more or less simultaneous, right? No one ever really goes away. Nothing ever really goes away, right? Past and present are constantly interacting with each other. So ancestor spirits are the most common kind of the Ara Urun, right? People of Urun. Right, so how does this relate to this particular play? Well, what the main character in the play, right, Ellison Oba, which, by the way, is a title, not a personal name, right? He is defined by his title, right? Ellison Oba means something like the man with the horse. And he is the Yoruba king's chief horseman. So the king's horseman and the king's master of hounds are both supposed to accompany the king into Orun when he dies, so that his spirit doesn't get lost on the way. This is why, at the beginning of the play, Ellison is getting ready to commit ritual suicide, right? This is his particular duty. He's supposed to help guide the king into the next world. And does he seem to be particularly bothered by this at the beginning of the play? No, he seems to be more or less ready for it, right? You know, his son in England has received the cable that, okay, the Yoruba king has died. Okay, it's time to come home. My father is already dead, right? And I'm going to have to take over the title. He is not to be denied anything on the last day of his life, right? So he is going through the marketplace, having a good time, right? Everybody's treating him with respect. Everybody gives him what he wants. And then what happens?
So a beautiful girl.
Yeah.
He gave to indulge in worldly desire.
Yeah, and this creates a problem, right? For a number of reasons, right? One, it creates a problem for the people because they can't deny him anything on the last day of his life. Even though this girl is already engaged to be married, as it turns out, to Ellison's own son with the mother of the marketplace. But you can't say no to the chief on the day when he's supposed to die. It creates a problem for Ellison in that from the time the king died a month ago, he's supposed to be cutting his ties to Aye, right? He's supposed to be cutting his ties to the mortal world. He is supposed to be treated as a man already dead. And so here we have a man already dead insisting on continuing to participate in the living world, continuing to connect himself in very, very concrete ways to the living world, right? Now, why do they keep calling him eater of leftovers? Right? This is the insult that's thrown at him in the last act of the play. Right? You're an eater of leftovers.
He's supposed to have left all of that. I mean, he's supposed to be done, and he is still wanting to, like you said, to take part in what should be passed.
Yeah. This is not for him anymore, right? This is for the next generation. But he can't let go and simply let the next generation have its own due, right? We see him on page 11 in this edition, noting, right, when he's when he's in conversation with the praise singer and the women. Right, actually, let's start on page 10 here, right? My rein is loosened. I am master of my fate. When the hour comes, watch me dance along the narrowing path glazed by the souls of my great precursors. My soul is eager. I shall not turn aside. You will not delay? Where the storm pleases, and when it directs the giants of the forest. When friendship summons is when the true comrade goes. Nothing will hold you back? Nothing. What? Has no one told you yet? I go to keep my friend and master company. Who says the mouth does not believe in? No, I have chewed all that before. I say I have. The world is not a constant honeypot. Where I found little, I made do with little. Where there was plenty, I gorged myself. My master's hands and mine have always dipped together, and, home or sacred feast, the bowl was beaten bronze, the meats so succulent our teeth accused us of neglect. We shared the choicest of the season's harvest of yams. How my friend would read desire in my eyes before I knew the cause. However rare, however precious, it was mine. So he's here acknowledging, right, that he's supposed to be letting go of earthly pleasures, right? He's already enjoyed all of the pleasures life has to offer, and it's time to move on. The women respond here, the town The very land was yours. The world was mine. Our joint hands raised house posts of trust that withstood the siege of envy and the termites of time. But the twilight hour brings bats and rodents. Shall I yield them cause to foul the rafters? What this refers to is that what Ellison is doing here is regarded as necessary for keeping the world working in the way that the Yoruba believe it does, right? The king needs his friend and companion to guide him to go join the ancestors, right? The path is set. They simply follow the footsteps of their fathers. But if Ellison doesn't go, the king might get lost along the way and never make it over. And spirits who get lost in this in-between realm come back to plague the living. Right? This isn't just a Yoruba belief. This is actually a fairly common belief in a number of cultures. The Greeks had the same basic belief, right? That people who didn't get a proper burial, who couldn't cross the river Styx into the underworld, right, and would return to plague their living relatives. So what Ellison is supposed to be doing, right, is supposed to help keep the world running smoothly. Ellison Oba, are you not that man who looked out of doors that stormy day, the god of luck limped by, drenched to the very lice that held his rags together? You took pity upon his sores and wished him fortune. Fortune was footloose this dawn, he replied, till you trapped him in a heartfelt wish that now returns to you. Ellison Oba, I say that you are that man who chanced upon the calabash of honor. You thought it was palm wine and drained its contents to the very drop, the final drop. Life has an end. A life that will outlive fame and friendship begs another name. What elder takes his tongue to his plate, licks it clean of every crumb? He will encounter silence when he calls on children to fulfill the smallest errand. Life is honor. It ends when honor ends, right? So this is ironic. Right? Ellison compares himself positively to the elder who takes the plate and licks every crumb off of it, right? The elder who takes for himself all of life's pleasures, all of life's good things, and leaves nothing for his children. Right, so here he says that that kind of person is bad, right? But this is exactly what he's about to do when he sees the young girl. Now, what role does Pilkings, the British administrator, play in all of this?
He wants to stop Ellison from carrying out his ritual. He wants to stop him from committing suicide.
Yeah, and thinks that the people should thank him for this, right?
He thinks that, yes, in his mind, he's doing them a favor by stopping somebody from committing suicide.
Yeah, so his view of this, right, is that it's a barbaric practice. And that it needs to be stopped. And that everybody will appreciate it if he stops this. Now, does Pilkings actually have the power to stop this?
Well, he doesn't stop him from, he still ends up killing himself, just not in the way that he wanted to.
Yeah, and he can't really, can he stop the people from going through with the ritual?
No.
He can stop Ellison himself from committing suicide, although, as we're going to note in a minute, right, there's some question of the extent to which Pilkings is actually responsible for Ellison stopping, and the extent to which Ellison himself simply backs away. Right, but yeah, Pilkings has no power to stop the ritual from coming to fruition, right? When Ellison fails to go through with it, Olunde takes his place. Right. The next generation, the children, fulfill the promises that their elders break. So if Ellison refuses to go, then Olunde must take his place. Somebody has to go, somebody has to do it. And there's really relatively little that Pilkings, who doesn't understand any of this, can do to stop it, right? So the reason I point this out is because the way this play and a lot of African novels and plays are taught is as a kind of, as Soyinka himself would have put it, clash of civilizations kind of narrative. Now, Soyinka explains in the author's note to the play his problem with this particular idea. So if we look on page 3 here, right, the bane of themes of this genre is that they are no sooner employed creatively than they acquire the facile tag of clash of cultures, a prejudicial label which, quite apart from its frequent misapplication, presupposes a potential equality in every given situation of the alien culture and the indigenous on the actual soil of the latter. In the area of misapplication, the overseas prize for illiteracy and mental conditioning undoubtedly goes to the blurb writer for the American edition of my novel, Season of Enemy, who unblushingly declares that this work portrays the clash between old values and new ways, between Western methods and African traditions. It is thanks to this kind of perverse mentality that I find it necessary to caution the would-be producer of this play against a sadly familiar reductionist tendency and to direct his vision instead to the far more difficult and risky task of eliciting the play's thronetic essence. So, what Soyinka is complaining about here is the tendency to assume that in any work that involves an indigenous culture and an alien invading culture, that the primary plot is about the battle between these two struggling cultures, right? The struggle between their values. And what he wants to focus, what he wants the reader and the producer of this play to focus on instead is the fact that this is a tragedy, right? And that there's really nothing that the British administrators can do to stop the tragedy from coming to its fruition, right? Pilkings and his wife are little more than bystanders. Who think they have more control over the situation than they actually do. Right? They've got police, right? They've got Nigerian servants. They've got His Royal Highness the Prince hanging out at the ball. But because they don't understand enough about the Yoruba, they can't really have any impact on Yoruba practices. So the clash here is represented as unequal, but, and, to the extent that there is a clash, but it's the Yoruba tradition really that is stronger than the British tradition, right? By and large, what the British do doesn't matter. Now, let's have a quick look here at the first appearance of the Pilkings at the beginning of Act 2. the veranda of the district officer's bungalow. A tango is playing from an old hand-cranked gramophone, and glimpsed through the wide windows and doors, which open onto the four-stage veranda, are the shapes of Simon Pilkings and his wife Jane, tangoing in and out of the shadows of the living room. They are wearing what is immediately apparent as some form of fancy dress. Right? In British English, does everyone understand what fancy dress means and how that's different from American English fancy dress? Yeah, fancy dress means costumes. The dance goes on for some moments, and then the figure of a native administration policeman emerges and climbs up the steps onto the veranda. He peeps through and observes the dancing couple, reacting with what is obviously a long-standing bewilderment. He stiffens suddenly. His expression changes to one of disbelief and horror. In his excitement, he upsets a flower pot and attracts the attention of the couple. They stop dancing. Is anyone out there? I'll just turn off the gramophone. Pilkings approaching the veranda. I'm sure I heard something fall over. The constable retreats slowly, open-mouthed as Pilkings approaches the veranda. Oh, it's you, Musa. Why didn't you just knock instead of knocking things over? Musa stammers badly and points a shaky finger at his dress. Mr. Pirrinkin, what is the matter with you? Who is it, dear? Oh, Musa. Yes, it's Musa, and acting most strangely. Madam, you too. What is the matter with you, man? Your costume, darling. Our fancy dress. Oh, hell, I'd forgotten all about that. Lifts the face mask over his head, showing his face. His wife follows suit. I think you've shocked his big pagan heart, bless him. So, what are they wearing? What's the outfit they've got on?
A ritual outfit, like usually worn to deal with death.
Yeah, like you remember when we talked about the Igloo and Things Fall Apart, right? There are these costumed people representing ancestor spirits, right? And the idea is that the spirit represented by the costume actually possesses the person while they're wearing the costume. The equivalent concept among the Yoruba is, I mean, even the name is similar, right? Egungun. And Musa is shocked because these two white people are doing a tango dressed up in these sacred, these sacred costumes, right? Costumes that they have no right to wear. Costumes that they clearly don't understand the significance of. Not only that, but like they raise the flaps to show their faces, right? Now, do you remember what happened? We didn't end up talking about this, we didn't have time, but do you remember what happened when an Igloo was unmasked and Things Fall Apart?
Isn't it like symbolizes the death to the something?
Yeah. One of the Christians, Enoch, right, one of the converts, unmasks one of the Igloo, and to the other villagers, right, what he's just done is killed an ancestor spirit. Right, he's committed an enormous blasphemy. And treating the Egungun costumes with this level of triviality, right, because they want to win a contest at the ball and impress the prince, approaches that same level of blasphemy. Right? I think you've shocked his big pagan heart, bless him. Nonsense, he's a Muslim. Come on, Musa, you don't believe in all this nonsense, do you? I thought you were a good Muslim. Mr. Pirrinkin, I beg you, what you think you do with that dress, it belonged to dead cult, not for human being. Oh, Musa, what a letdown you are. I swear by you at the club, you know. Thank God for Musa. He doesn't believe in any mumbo-jumbo. And now look at you. So because Musa and the houseboy Joseph are respectively, right, a Muslim and a Christian, Pilkings assumes that they give up, thus, any connection to their native culture, right? He assumes that they've abandoned and left behind any relationship to Yoruba belief systems. Now, do you notice a difference, just sort of to continue along these lines, in the way Musa and Joseph talk and the way the other Yoruba characters talk? We can probably see this most clearly if we watch Musa's completely ineffectual interaction with the market women at the beginning of Act 3 on page 27. Can I get a volunteer to be a Musa? And can I get 3 volunteers to read the women's parts?
I'll be a moose.
All right, Lindsay be a Musa, and I need woman 1, woman 2, woman 3. Actually, no, just two women.
I don't have my book, or else I would.
All right, Brandon,
Okay.
can you do it?
Yeah.
And then just somebody else read the second one part. All right, so a Musa from I Am Tell You Woman.
I am tell you women for last time to come on my road. I am here on official business.
Official business, you white man's eunuch. Official business is taking place where you want to go, and it's a business you wouldn't understand.
That doesn't fool. Oh, right,
On his written. That doesn't fool anyone. It's the one you carry in your government knickers that counts. She bends low as if to peep under the baggy shorts. The embarrassed constable quickly puts his knees together. The women roar.
You mean there's nothing there at all?
Oh, there was something. You know that handbell which the white man uses to summon his servants?
I hope you women know that interfering with officer in execution of his duty is criminal offense.
Interfere. He says we're interfering with him. You foolish man, we're telling you there's nothing to interfere with.
I am ordering you now to clear the road.
What road? The one your father built?
You're a policeman, not so? Do you know what they call trespassing in court? Or do you think that kind of road is built for every kind of feat?
Go back and tell the white man who sent you to come himself.
If I go, I will come back with reinforcement, and we will all return carrying weapons.
Okay, we can stop there, right? Do we notice a difference in Musa's speech patterns?
Kind of broken?
Yeah. Musa speaks in what's called Pigeon. Right, a kind of broken English. Right, that whereas the market women, right, do they speak in Pigeon?
No.
And it's to be assumed they're speaking the same language, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to understand each other. But Musa and Joseph, who have both submitted, in some sense, to foreign cultural influences, do speak in Pigeon, right? Working for the British and converting to other religions seems to have divorced them enough, like, it seems to place them between two different cultures, right? And I think that's what the Pigeon is meant to represent, right? They still know the Yoruba traditions, but they can't quite communicate with the other Yoruba anymore, nor can they really effectively communicate with the British, right? Their speech marks them as different from both. Now, how many of you are familiar with the concept of liminality? Liminality. Anybody know what liminality means?
Something limited.
It actually is nothing. It's not limits. that it's about. It comes from a Latin word, limen, which means threshold. So a liminal space, or a liminal person, is one that kind of exists between two different phases, right? It's not quite one thing, and it's not quite the other, but it's also somehow both. For example, if you want to talk about like liminal spaces, a forest clearing is neither field nor forest, but it's also sort of both, right? It's a beach is neither ocean nor land, but is also both. If we want to talk about this in terms of, say, phases of personal development, right? A person who has just reached puberty, right, is neither a child nor an adult, but is also both. Right? In fact, where this particular term comes from is actually from discussion of human development and initiation rites, right? So, Musa and Joseph are liminal characters in that they are stuck between both worlds and can't they're stuck between two worlds and can't really fully belong to either one. Right? We can see from their reaction to the Agungun masks, right, that they've not left the Yoruba world behind, but that world no longer accepts them because they've converted to other religions and taken employment with the British. As we see through Musa's interactions with the market women, right, who constantly mock his, they mock his sexual prowess, right? It's, they keep calling him white man's eunuch, and where's your baton, and all that sort of thing, right? They even take his baton from him in a sort of symbolic castration. And Joseph, even though he claims not to believe in the Agungun, right, is still offended by the Pilking's dance and by the Pilking's attitude towards these costumes, right? And I forget whether it's Simon or Jim, one of them says like, we're probably going to have to be looking for a new houseboy tomorrow, right? That they've offended Joseph enough that he's likely to quit. Yeah, Linda.
Would Elisan's son Oland, is that his name?
Olunde, yes.
Would he be in that too? Because he had went over to medical school, but when he found out that he thought that his father was dead, so he came back. So would he kind of be in that same kind of liminality in that he was in going to medical school, or did he still?
Well, I think one thing we notice about Olunde, right, is that he maintains the level of eloquent speech that's given to the other Yoruba characters. Right? He doesn't start talking in Pigeon like a Musa or Joseph. And I think it might actually be helpful if we go to the scene in which Olunde first appears. And watch his interaction with Mrs. Pilking. So can I get a volunteer to be Olunde and a volunteer to be Jane? On page 40.
I'll be Olunde.
All right, you can be Olunde and I need a Jane.
I'll be Jane.
All right, you be Jane.
Page
So
40.
page 40, yeah. So start from Olunde emerging into the lights.
I didn't mean to startle you, madam. I am looking for the district officer.
Wait a minute. Don't I know you? Yes, you are Olunde, the young man who...
Mrs. Pilking, how fortunate. I came here to look for your husband.
Olunde, let's look at you. What a fine young man you've become. Grand but solemn. Good God, when did you return? Simon never said a word. But you do look well, Olunde, really.
You are, well, you look quite well yourself. Mrs. Pilking, from what little I can see of you.
Oh, this. It's caused quite a stir, I assure you, and not all of it is very pleasant. You're not shocked, I hope.
Why should I be? But don't you find it rather hot in here? Your skin must find it difficult to breathe.
Well, it is a little hot, I must confess, but it's all in a good cause.
What cause, Mrs. Pilkins?
All this, the ball, and His Highness being here in person and all that.
And that is a good cause for which you desecrate an ancestral mass?
Oh, so you're shocked after all. How disappointing.
No, I'm not shocked, Mrs. Pilkins. You forget that I have now spent 4 years among your people. I discovered that you have no respect for what you do not understand.
Okay, you guys can stop there. So, why is Olunde not shocked where a Musa and Joseph, he's offended, right? But he's not shocked. Why isn't he shocked while Musa and Joseph were?
Because he had been over at medical school and he had lived with other
Yeah.
children, so he saw that
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have respect for things that they didn't understand.
Yeah, he is here expressing an understanding of British culture, right? That I've lived among you, I've been to England, I've studied there, I've met a lot of English people, and this is what I've learned about you, right? I'm offended that you would do this, but I'm not surprised given what I know of other English people, right? So he is displaying a level of cultural competence, cross-cultural competence, right, that a Musa and Joseph do not. He doesn't seem to be quite caught in the middle in the same ways that they are, right? In part because he sees both sides of the issue, even though his heart really seems to be on the Yoruba side of it, right? So if we continue a little, if we actually continue down a little bit, from Jane, oh, so you've returned with a chip on your shoulder.
Oh, so you returned with a chip on your shoulder. That's a pity, Olunde. I'm sorry. Take it then that you did not find your stay in England altogether edifying.
Page 40.
Yep, page 41. Continuing the same.
Okay, sorry. I don't say that. I found your people quite admirable in many ways. Their conduct and courage in this war, for instance.
Ah, yes, the war. Here, of course, it is all rather remote. From time to time, we have a blackout drill just to remind us that there is a war on, and the rare convoy passes through on its way somewhere or on maneuvers. Mind you, there is the occasional bit of excitement like that ship that was blown up in the harbor.
Here, do you mean through enemy action?
Oh no, the war hasn't come that close. The captain did it himself. I don't quite understand it really. Simon tried to explain. The ship had to be blown up because it had become dangerous to the other ships, even to the city itself. Hundreds of the coastal population would have died.
Maybe it was loaded with ammunition and had caught fire, or some of those lethal gases they've been experimenting on.
Something like that. The captain blew himself up with it deliberately. Simon said someone had to remain on board to light the fuse.
It must have been a very short fuse.
I don't know much about it, only that there was no other way to save lives, no time to devise anything else. The captain took the decision and carried it out.
Okay, you can stop right there, right? So, to the Pilkings, this is a praiseworthy suicide, right? The captain blew up his own ship and went down with it in order to save the lives of all the people in the harbor, right? So, to Simon and Jane, this is a good thing, right? The captain did a heroic thing. Now, why do they regard Ellison's action differently?
Because they don't understand.
Yeah, because they don't understand that the Yoruba believe that this is actually what's necessary to save lives, right? That this is what's necessary to keep the world working in proper order. Right, so duty to country of the captain's sort they understand, right? Duty to the people of Ellison's sort they don't quite seem to grasp, right? And I think that the Pilkings really, like, the real reason they're in the play is not to stop Ellison's suicide, right? Ellison may very well have backed off from that on his own, regardless of what the Pilkings did, right? For reasons we'll see in a moment. And he certainly gives lots of indications, even in the first acts, that he's not going to go through with what he's supposed to do. What the Pilkings really serve as is sort of perspective characters for a non-Yoruba audience, right? Particularly a white European audience who don't understand Yoruba customs, who don't understand Yoruba values, and need to have those things explained to them. Right? And Olunde is the explainer. Olunde, comes back from England. He understands British culture well enough to know what their values are, and he is able to explain Yoruba practices in terms a British person would understand, even if it does cause a rift between him and the Pilkings at certain points, right? So yeah, what the Pilkings are really there to do is sort of more to provide a perspective in the play for, frankly, people like us, right? People who have grown up in sort of Western or European-based societies, who judge other societies not by their own standards, but by ours. That what we regard as barbaric must thus be barbaric. But again, the Pilkings have no real power to stop what's going on here. Right? It's Ellison himself who screws up. If we look at the moment when he is talking to his bride on page 53. My young bride, did you hear the ghostly one? You sit and sob in your silent heart, but say nothing to all this. First I blamed the white man. Then I blamed my gods for deserting me. Now I feel I want to blame you for the mystery of the sapping of my will. But blame is a strange peace offering for a man to bring a world he has deeply wronged and to its innocent dwellers. O little mother, I have taken countless women in my life, but you are more than a desire of the flesh. I needed you as the abyss across which my body must be drawn. I filled it with earth and dropped my seed in it at the moment of preparedness for my crossing. You were the final gift of the living to their emissary to the land of the ancestors. And perhaps your warmth and youth brought new insights of this world to me and turned my feet leaden on this side of the abyss. For I confess to you, daughter, my weakness came not merely from the abomination of the white man who came violently into my fading presence. There was also a weight of longing on my earth-held limbs. I would have shaken it off. Already my foot had begun to lift, but then the white ghost entered and all was defiled. So he acknowledges here that his failure was not really Pilking's fault. It is, at least on some level, his own fault that he missed the gate. Right? He has that conversation with Pilkings about the gate into Orun is only open at a certain point. He's supposed to know in the ritual when that gate is open and cross at that moment. But because his new bride brought new worldly pleasures to him, and opened up to him, again, how good life was, how pleasant life was, and what he'd be leaving behind if he died, it makes it that much harder for him to go. It makes it that much harder for him to go and cross over. Right? So Ellison, because he doesn't complete the ritual, is stuck in one of these liminal states, right? He is a man who is neither alive nor dead, at least as far as his people are concerned, right? He is supposed to belong to the world of the dead. But because the ritual is interrupted before he crosses over, he's stuck in the world of the living, where he no longer belongs. Now, just as a couple of little side points here. Where is he being held? Do you notice where they keep him prisoner?
It's like a slave, where they kept, a cellar where they kept slaves.
Yeah, back before the slave trade was ended. Yeah, they keep him in a cellar, in a cage that was reserved for slaves. And he's chained up, right? So, this also reveals like a kind of secret darkness in the current seemingly more liberal British administration, right? It's like, well, we're presenting a friendlier face now, right? Simon and Jane seem clueless but reasonably nice. But there's this dark corner of the residency that they're still using to place inconvenient people, right? And they're going to keep him there chained up. Now, what does he actually use to kill himself?
Chains.
The chains, yeah. So there is this sort of symbolic resonance there, right? This reminder of the transatlantic slave trade at the very end of Ellison's life. Right? And I'm not really quite sure what to do with this part of it, to be honest. Yeah, Dee.
This might be a stretch, but I
Uh-huh.
thought it was interesting that he made his bride his future daughter-in-law
Mhm.
in Musa, a Muslim, because Muhammad
Mhm.
took one of his wives was
Mhm.
pretty much the same situation.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought that was interesting, maybe that he was hinting from the beginning that he was becoming one of those people.
I would actually be willing to, I mean, like the three largest religious groupings in Nigeria are Muslims, mostly in the north, Christians, mostly in the south, and those who still follow the traditional religious practices of whatever nation they belong to. This actually you find mostly still among the Yoruba and the Igbo. I think the Hausa and Fulani in the north are mostly Muslim. But yeah, and of course Soyinka would be very much aware of those particular traditions. Soyinka is, Soyinka is Yoruba. I think he's a more or less secular person, but is very much interested and well versed in Yoruba tradition. But would certainly be familiar with Islam as well. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily too much of a stretch. I think that may actually demonstrate to some level the foreignness of like how Ellison is turning away from his people. Yeah, I'd be willing to buy that. And that turning away leads him into captivity. Yeah, I can see that. I can go with that. Good job. All right, well, I mean, we've got about 15 minutes to go, and I've more or less said everything I feel like I need to say on this. Do you guys have any questions about this? Or anything, any comments you want to make?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I found it peculiar about why did Ellison waited until he was in the jail place to kill himself, where he could have done so at any time, even though he had to change. Why didn't he just do it like after, like once he was placed in there at the ritual site?
Well, when he does kill himself, is he still doing so for the reason he was supposed to?
He's upset that he saw his son.
Yeah, his suicide at the end is out of shame, really, right? He's not going to be the one to accompany the king into Orun now. Olunde has taken that job. Olunde did what his father couldn't. And I think if we look at his conversation with Pilkings, just before he reveals his own guilt to his young bride on page 51, right? Pilkings says, well, I did my duty as I saw it. I have no regrets. No. The regrets of life always come later. Some moments pause. You are waiting for dawn, white man. I hear you saying to yourself, only so many hours until dawn and then the danger is over. All I must do is to keep him alive tonight. You don't quite understand it all, but you know that tonight is when what ought to be must be brought about. I shall ease your mind even more, ghostly one. It is not an entire night, but a moment of the night, and that moment is past. The moon was my messenger and guide. When it reached a certain gateway in the sky, it touched that moment for which my whole life has been spent in blessings. Even I do not know the gateway. I have stood here and scanned the sky for a glimpse of that door, but I cannot see it. Human eyes are useless for a search of this nature. But in the house of Osugbo, those who keep watch through the spirit recognize the moment. They sent word to me through the voice of our sacred drums to prepare myself. I heard them, and I shed all thoughts of earth. I began to follow the moon to the abode of the gods, servant to the White King. That was when you entered my chosen place of departure on feet of desecration. So why can't he just kill himself at any time?
A certain moment of the moon.
Yeah, it had to be at the right moment. It had to be when the drums and the diviners said that the gate was open. And he missed that moment. So, now he lingers until he finally kills himself out of shame. Right, again, I think that the chains have something to do with that, right? With the shame and humiliation of slavery. You know, he's killing himself with the instrument of humiliation, basically. But I don't know. Yeah, that's why he doesn't just finish himself off. And it's because he can't ritually. Any other questions?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Alan kills himself because his father did not.
Mhm.
But could the same be said for him? Because how did he know when the right moment was? Could he say that he was successful in being able to be the guide for the king?
The moment would be different for the son than for the father. Yeah, I mean, essentially they would have to start the ritual over again with Olunde in the role rather than his father. So yeah, the moment passed for Ellison. That doesn't mean that it passed for Olunde.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, I know that it's horribly hot in here and some of you look like you're melting. So, yeah, go enjoy your weekend. If you have any questions about the exam over the weekend, please feel free to email me. We'll see you on Tuesday.